Hi class, we're getting ready to start writing essays during class time. And one thing that's hard with that is that we're going to be talking about situations from your life and feelings that you might have had. And when we do that, sometimes we run into some grammar problems. So I want to talk about participle adjectives. In your book, this is on page 236, so you can turn to page 236 and look at the chart 11-8 as we follow along with this video. The main thing about participle adjectives is that they come from verbs. And so I have some verbs here that you might not have thought of as verbs before: tire, exhaust, and frighten. Frighten is the one that's most obviously a verb, but tire and exhaust you usually don't think of because you just think of the adjective form, I'm tired or I'm exhausted. Now we're going to talk about why you would use exhausted or exhausting in a sentence depending on the situation. Because these are verbs, they have two different types of participle adjectives. So from the verbs, you can make an ing participle, like tiring, exhausting, or frightening, or you can make a past participle, tired, exhausted, or frightened. Using these different forms of the adjectives requires a kind of understanding of something called active voice and passive voice. So we're going to talk about how to understand which one is an active voice situation where you would use the ing participle, and which one is a passive voice situation where you would use the ed participle. The active voice is from ideas like this: class exhausted me. So notice that the subject of the sentence is class. So I can really say it's class's fault that this happened. Class exhausted me. Class did it. Class is the active thing in this sentence. So class is actually doing the exhausting thing. So when I make exhaust into an adjective, I use a be verb to connect my adjective. Remember that be verbs are linking verbs, so we can use the be verb to connect an adjective to describe a subject, because the subject is a noun. So now I can say class was exhausting. This is not present progressive. This is a be verb and an adjective, because these are participle adjectives. If I say class was exhausting, I'm not saying that it was happening during a time, like with while or when. I'm actually saying that the state of the class was that it was described like this. It made me feel very, very tired. So class was exhausting is subject, be verb, and adjective. Because it was class's fault, I use the active form of the adjective, which is the ing word. It's easy to remember that the ing is the active form because that's what we use for progressives. So ing is always kind of showing us that it's active in some way. Either it's an active voice adjective or it's a progressive verb. In this case, remember, it's not a progressive verb. It's an active voice adjective. But I might want to describe me instead of describing class, because there are two nouns in the sentence, class and me, the direct object. Then I would use the passive voice form of the sentence. So class exhausted me, it's class's fault that I feel this way. If I use the passive voice, I'm focusing on how I feel, not on what class did. So the important thing is what I'm catching from class. It's not what class was doing, it's what I was feeling from class. So then I would use the passive voice verb. I was exhausted, and then I can add something like by class or after class. And the idea here is that it's class's fault. Class did it to me. And so I am not the active thing in the sentence. I didn't do anything. Class did everything. So I can't use the active form of the verb because the subject didn't do anything. I'm just feeling something because of what the subject did or what the other object did. So I was exhausted after class. This is really similar to any time that you're talking about how you feel. You might say, I felt frightened in the movie because it was really scary. But I could say the movie was terrifying. I would use the ing form when I describe the movie, because the movie did it. The movie terrified me. The movie was terrifying because it was the active thing. I felt terrified, so I say I was terrified. at the movie or after the movie or by the movie, so that the movie was doing it. So just to summarize what we're talking about here, there are some general rules that people usually go by. These general rules don't always work, so you have to think about the meaning. But these general rules can help when you're writing an essay and you feel pressured by time. One thing that you want to remember is that situations generally use the ing adjective. This is things like the movie was terrifying. The movie is a situation that you were in, and it made you feel terrified, but the movie didn't feel terrified. The movie was terrifying. It also is a general rule that describing how someone feels generally requires an ed adjective. So when you're describing how somebody felt in a situation, we would use the ed. But if the person was doing something that was the active thing, then you would use the ing. An example would be, Joe was terrifying in his Halloween costume. Now he was the situation that was scary, so we don't say he was terrified. He was terrifying. Everybody else felt terrified because of Joe's costume. So I can say, I was terrified by Joe's costume. I felt terrified. So when we describe how someone feels, we use the ed. But when we describe what someone's doing, we might not use the ed. Some teachers like to say that you always use ed for people and you always use ing for other things. That's not necessarily true, because someone could do something actively that would be terrifying. Someone could do something that would be surprising or shocking. So you have to think about who is acting in the sentence and who is feeling from that action. All right, in your book, you can check out page 236, and there are some exercises there after the chart. Chart 11.8 has some great examples in it, talking about who is acting and who is not acting, so that you can see the passive and active. Exercise 40 all the way through 45 focus on using participle adjectives and choosing whether you use the ing or the ed. In the back of your book, use the answer key to check yourself and see where you get confused. Then you can go back to chart 11.8 to try to figure out what you got wrong in a situation. If you have any questions, please ask me during class time. Thanks. I'm not Mrs. Ingle anymore. I'm a student in a grammar class. And this is Jack, my classmate. Here we go. Oh, Jack, I can't believe we're in grammar again. I just want to go home and eat dinner. I'm so hungry. And Jack says, I'm so boring. Mrs. Ingle is so bored. This is a big problem, because here we have a huge participle adjective mistake on Jack's part. I don't think he's saying what he thinks he's saying in this case. We talked about how situations usually take the ing form and people usually take the ed form. But we need to make sure that we're describing people's feelings, not a situation with a person's personality. So personality actually fits into the situations category, so it would get an ing verb. Feelings take an ed adjective. So here, he says, I'm so boring. He's actually describing himself and his personality. So how this works is that when we say, I'm so boring, we actually mean I bore myself. So this is where this comes from. The verb is bore. If I say, I'm so boring, it's the active voice, so I have to say I bore myself, which means my personality is boring. That's a horrible thing to say about yourself. You never want to say, I'm so boring. If we say Mrs. Ingle is bored, it's kind of funny because it's saying something bores Mrs. Ingle because she feels bored. So this is the passive situation. Something is making her feel bored. So it's probably the class. So what Jack is saying is actually the opposite of what he wants to say. He wants to say, I'm so bored, Mrs. Ingle is so boring. But he's actually saying the opposite. This is a common mistake in essays with words like surprised. When people are talking about a birthday party or something like that, they might say, I'm so surprising. Actually, they meant they were surprised because they felt surprised. It might also be with the word shocking. I'm so shocking. That means that you make a bad impression on people. You don't want to say that because you're talking about your personality. So you want to make sure you use that ED word. It might also be the same for interesting. If you start saying, I'm so interesting, it means that you're talking about your personality, not the situation that you are in. So if you are in an interesting situation, like going to the Grand Canyon or being on a really cool vacation, you would say the vacation was interesting, but I was so interested in the thing that I was looking at. So be careful, don't make some of these common mistakes that people make. Thanks.